Hello, I'm Doug Bradburn. I'm a current member of Pohick Church, as well as president and CEO of George Washington's Mount Vernon. I'm an historian of the American colonial period, and I've come to deeply appreciate George Washington's longtime devotion to the Christian faith, to his church community here at Pohick Church, and to the surrounding area once called Truro Parish. Now, before the Revolutionary War, most colonial churches were Church of England, under the authority of the Archbishop of Canterbury and the British monarch. As in England, geographic areas similar to today's counties were called parishes. And a parish's boundaries enclosed not only a central church, but all the properties of surrounding families. And so a church's governing board, the vestry, not only directed the fiduciary concerns of the church, they acted as the magistrates of the community at large, doling out moral judgments as well as care for orphans and widows. Now, residents of Truro Parish, whose seat was here at Pohick Church, were assessed levies, like taxes that covered parish expenses. This included the building, the running of the churches, the salary for the ministers. It also functioned as the community meeting hall. Built in the early 1700s out of wood, each of the first two Pohick Church buildings eventually began to rot and had to be replaced. Originally called the Occoquan Church, the first building was situated near the port of Colchester. The second building, called Pohick Church, was located on the corner of Old Colchester Road and Gunston Road. George Washington's father, Augustine Washington, was on the vestry of that church. The word Pohick refers to a body of water and is believed to be an Algonquin word for hickory. The second Pohick Church was a mere 2 miles from the home of one of Pohick's vestrymen, a prominent Virginia farmer named George Mason. You may recall George Mason was one of the two authors of the Fairfax Resolves. He was also the author of the Virginia Declaration of Rights, which is the precursor to the U.S. Constitution's Bill of Rights. The other author was none other than George Washington. Mason and Washington, great friends with similar ideas about freedom as well as religion, ultimately didn't always see eye to eye and would become enemies at the end of their life. In 1767, both were members of the vestry that identified the need for a new church, but they lived on opposite sides of Pohick Creek. Mason lived on the south side where the current Pohick Church stood, so he rallied for a new church to be built there. George Washington preferred the north side, more accessible to Mount Vernon. So they launched a spirited debate about the site of the new Pohick Church. The story can be found in Pohick's original 1732 to 1785 vestry minutes, which can be found on loan at George Washington's Presidential Library at Mount Vernon. General Washington was on Pohick's vestry for 23 years, often serving as the church warden. Now, he surveyed the area for a new church, drawing out a map at a high point above the Occoquan River on the north side of the creek. He argued compellingly that the new church could be more centrally located to the settlement of people. Washington won the debate. The vestry chose to build on this property, which now encompassed 45 acres at the corner of Old Colchester Road and Richmond Highway. A planter named Daniel French owned the land where this building was built. In 1769, the vestry awarded a contract to French as general contractor of the construction. French deeded a little more than 3 acres to the Truro vestry for the new church for 1 guinea per acre. French was paid in increments, a total of 877 pounds of tobacco, the current money of Virginia, to build the church. Now, French was also a Fairfax County Court justice, along with George Washington. In September of 1768, both French and Washington were sworn in together as justices of Fairfax County Court. James Wren and William West were each paid 40 shillings for drawings furnished to the vestry. Wren, who drew the plans, claimed descent from Sir Christopher Wren, a distinguished architect who designed many buildings in London, as well as the Wren Building at the College of William and Mary. The drawings used for the new Pohick Church were those used for Falls Church, but the size and many other details of Pohick Church were different, specified in the vestry minutes. As the seat of Truro Parish, the new Pohick Church needed to be larger than Falls Church. The vestry minutes spelled out the size, 65 feet long, 45.5 feet wide, and with walls 28 feet high from the foundations. For the west wall, 2 doors and 1 window were specified for the new church instead of 2 windows and 1 door at Falls Church. The carpenter was William Bromley of Gunston Hall. William Copine, who worked on Achaia Church, was the stonemason. He also made the colonial font via a separate contract for £6. The vestry also commissioned the creation of this redos with the Apostles' Creed, Lord's Prayer, and the 10 Commandments. In 1771, Daniel French died, leaving George Mason as general contractor to finish the church in 1774, just 2 years before the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration was probably read for one of the first times at the surrounding community on the steps of Pohick Church. Not long afterwards, someone neatly scratched through the prayer for the monarch in the 1662 Book of Common Prayer donated to the Colonial Church. Today, I'm standing in General Washington's pew, which he purchased to help fund the construction of this beautiful church. He purchased a second pew as well, which is right here, and his next-door neighbor was George Fairfax. Across the aisle beyond me there were George Mason's 2 pews and the pews of several other prominent colonial families like the Hendersons. These pews were originally constructed with walls about 2 feet higher, so that parishioners would look up and focus on the pulpit and the Word of God instead of spying on their neighbors. Families kept heated bricks at their feet to keep warm during winter services. And of course, they would arrive by horse and carriage. In those days, this new church was really built in the middle of nowhere. Consequently, since few lived close enough to hear a bell ringing, the church was built without a bell tower. Furthermore, in keeping with Georgian architecture, it was also constructed without a steeple. Today, D.C. suburbs have grown up around Washington's country church. Thousands of cars pass by daily on an 8-lane highway. And with no recognizable church elements, many, including longtime residents, mistakenly believe Pohick Church is a museum. This couldn't be further from the truth. We are an Episcopal Anglican community of more than 500, filled with people of all ages, ethnicity, and background. Many are connected to the military. Our large and lively congregation quips, "No steeple, but lots of people." Or come for the history, stay for the worship. And best of all, #not a museum. Even as we proudly proclaim Pohick as the home church of George Washington, George Mason, George Fairfax, we emphasize our vision to bridge history and the future. Pohick Church is embracing the past, welcoming in the present, and transforming the future. Pohick rectors maintain a long and warm relationship with Mount Vernon to this day. Reverend Lynn preaches that Pohickians maintain the spirit of our colonial ancestors, especially George Washington, who was formed in an Anglican Christian ethos of moderation, balance, incarnational spirituality, and hospitality. Washington was a huge proponent of prayer, loved to collect and read sermons, and required that the Continental Army always had chaplains. We hope you enjoyed learning about our colonial ancestors' faith here at Pohick Church, the Mother Church of Virginia. If you plan to visit the D.C. area, come to Mount Vernon, see a replica of Pohick Church pew in our museum. Then be sure to come to the real thing. Pohick Church is open daily for self-directed tours, and our docents provide guided tours after Sunday services and by request. Please go to www.pohick.org for more information. And of course, stay for the worship.